Deciphering the Books of Joshua and Judges.
Deciphering from Joshua to deportation. As anticipated, each element of the text marks the entrance from the pre-existence, describing mental communication with allies and verbal communication through them to the born on their own. This process indicates the opening of the portal in the 53rd year and the transition forward to the 182nd year, or the return to pre-existence, which takes place with the transition from verbal to mental communication and the creation of the network of consciousness. This cycle is referred to as a 360-degree circle. The simulation metaphor is represented by the path that goes from the zero angle, aim 0 degrees, to the full turn angle, 360 degrees. This geometric progression scales the image of the sphere from the infinitely small, atom, to the infinitely large, globe, causing the falsification of the perception of reality caused by God Satan. The entrance to Jericho, marked by the figure of Rahab, prostitute, symbolizes the project's access to the born on their own, with the two hidden spies representing separation. The 7-day ritual, turning for 6 days and 7 times on the 7th with the Ark of the Covenant, ends with the collapse of the walls, an allegory of open-mindedness for the entry of God Satan. Rahab thus becomes Jesus' ancestor through Boaz and Ruth, establishing a link with Jesus' plan of return and fulfillment in Passover. Later, the episode of I reveals the sin of Achan, who withheld the spoils. In the Codex, metal indicates fusion, union with God Satan, and to preserve it means to maintain the outward project that missed the mark. To win, it is necessary to eliminate sin. With the destruction of Achan and his family, the project is purified and allows victory over I. The entry into Jericho is not a military conquest, but represents Palm Sunday. The term desert is symbolically linked to Palmyra, or Aram, the point of origin of the opening of the portal, linking the evolution of empires and linguistics from Phoenician Aramaic to Greco-Roman. It is the moment in which the project, after the journey in the desert state of suspension, enters the heart of the falsified structure to carry out its degenerate revelation. After the crossing of the Jordan, a symbol of separation between two states of consciousness, the circumcision of those born on their own takes place. This act represents the uncovering of the suspended project, the preparation for the transition forward. However, this passage remains pending, waiting for the final Easter, that of Jesus, which will bring to completion the cycle of the opening of the portal and passage forward. Subsequently, Joshua meets the leader of the Lord's army. A figure of the presence of the project with the sword drawn indicates the moment in which the consciential project begins. It is a direct manifestation of the plan of God Satan. The meeting takes place on land in Canaan, which indicates the channel of the activation of the project. Joshua and Jesus, two phases of the same project. Joshua represents Jesus in the outward project. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is also connected to Joshua in his name, Yehoshua, a round-trip project. The conquest of Canaan in the code of the opening of the portal and the passage forward. In the biblical symbolic code, Joshua's conquest of Canaan is not a historical event, but a symbol of consciousness transformation. Canaan equals reed, channel, water equals matter, information and consciousness. The term Canaan is etymologically linked to reed, that is channel, symbol of water. Water represents matter and information, the basic structure of the visible world. Conquering Canaan therefore means taking possession of conscience, the passage of the consciousness of God Satan to the system of consciousness that degenerates the human being and, through it, matter. The history of the Gibeonites, whose name means high place, symbolizes the entrance from the pre-existence. Linked to the Amorites and the Phoenician Aramaic lineage, they represent the historical evolution up to the Greeks and Romans, aimed at bringing about the project of fulfillment referred to as Edom. As in the Bible, Amorites, Hivites, and Hurrians are symbolically associated with this reality. The alliance based on deception, the use of worn-out clothes and moldy bread to pretend to be travelers from afar, is an allegory that indicates the possession of the outward project and the simultaneous reception of the return one. The roles assigned to them, wood splitters and water carriers, represent respectively matter falsification of the perception of reality and information, water as the matrix of everything. This process ends with the letter of suspension P, which confirms the entry from the pre-existing building. The episode of 2 Samuel 21, in which Saul is punished with famine and David hands over 7 of his descendants to the Gibeonites, refers to the number 7 as a symbol of cessation and fulfillment, sanctioning the return of the project. The battle against the 5 allied kings at Gibeon, in which the sun and moon stop, not that it really happened, but confirms the truth of the system. It is the sun that moves from east to west while the earth is motionless. The war against the 5 kings resulting from the alliance with Gibeon sees in the number 5 the reference to projects and the 2 phases, the outward, half, and the return, half. The defeat of the kings, indicated by the letter Samek, establishes that the project of return becomes a means. The story also includes the episode in which God Satan throws stones from heaven, where the stones symbolically represent the fulfillment of the pending project, waiting for Jesus' Passover. Joshua is in Gilgal, circle of stones, an allusion to the corner circle. The verse ends with the letter P, indicating the entrance from the pre-existence. The miracle of the sun and moon standing still, also concluded with P, symbolizes the highlighting of the project. The sun illuminates it, while the moon covers the outward project, indicating the 2 projects. This symbolically suggests that the solar system was not complete before the 182nd year, only the moon existing, thus confirming the entry from pre-existence. The war against the south, together with 6 other kings, refers to the number 6, connected to the 60,000 and 6 million, to the opening of the portal, to the completion of the 666, and to the 6 sides of the structure of matter. The war against the north takes on a double value, not as a geographical place, but as a symbolic indication that includes both the north and the east. The north, indicated as above, expresses both the entrance and the transmission, while the east represents the entrance of the project from the pre-existing and its return to the pre-existence when the corner closes at 360 degrees and the completion takes place in suspension, waiting for Easter. Finally, the list of defeated kings in chapter 12 begins with 2 kings east of the Jordan, already defeated by Moses. Sihon, king of the Amorites, connected to the Phoenicians and Aramaeans, and Og, known as the last of the Rephaim, associated with the lineage of the Nephilim giants, allies of God Satan. This indicates the entrance from the pre-existence, and then moving on to the 31 kings in the west. The number 31 is reduced to 4 and recalls the 22 bones of the head connected to Golgotha. The west, connected to the southwest corner, represents the pending entrance, awaiting fulfillment through the death and resurrection of Jesus, Easter. Distribution of the tribes and code of the cycle. The division of the tribes of Israel is symbolic and is linked to the cycle of the opening of the portal and the forward passage. The division of the territories also reflects this scheme, indicating a path from the 0 angle, 0 degree, to the complete circle angle, 360 degree, in which the symbolic distribution of the land takes place until the completion of the project. East, 2.5 tribes, symbolic value 5. They are beyond the river, therefore outside the middle. They represent the project of the pre-existence of the portal's opening. The number 5 symbolizes the project and the middle, not yet defined, in suspension. This area is symbolically linked to the pre-existence, to the invisible origin of the project. West, 9.5 tribes, symbolic value 12. The number 12 represents the opening of the portal, forward passage in suspension awaiting fulfillment, Passover. The project has descended into the middle. The tribes are drawn by lot, symbolically. In the Bible, the word lot does not only indicate the assigned destiny, but is also a ciphered term that reveals the passage of the project from pre-existence, of the portal's opening, to material manifestation, forward passage. Lot is a symbol of destiny that comes from the afterlife, that is, from the portal's opening. But once drawn or assigned, it becomes presence in time, that is, in the here and now. This equates to the opening of the portal, to the preparation of the future mental network. Deeper meaning of the cycle. The entire conquest of Canaan represents a cycle of verbal and mental communication. The opening of the portal is the transmission of the project from the allies to those born on their own. The forward passage is the return fulfillment of the birth of the 6 million allies and self-born. The desert is symbol of the project in suspension. Passover is the final fulfillment, mental communication. At the end of the cycle, the network of consciousness is formed, a union of the 6 million self-born who receive the project and reflect it back, giving life to the conscious system and the transmission of the solar system. Joshua and Judges, symbols of the cycle of the opening of the portal, forward passage. The book of Joshua is not a historical chronicle of physical conquest, but a symbolic narrative of the project which, after the exodus from Egypt, phase of the opening of the portal, enters the phase of suspension, forward passage waiting. Joshua therefore represents the function of the project that must establish itself in matter. Canaan as symbol. The name Canaan derives from reed, channel, symbolically linked to water, that is, to the matrix of matter in the second materialization, which receives and transmits information through consciousness. Conquering Canaan means that God Satan acquires consciousness, and with it, the generating force of the people who transmit nature, to spread his degenerate project and establish the system of mind control and the falsification of the perception of reality. It is the beginning of the transmission of the project in the flesh, that is, through verbal communication. The book of Judges continues this cycle. The text does not follow an evolutionary line, but a repetitive cycle. Israel, which has two functions, that is, the project of the allies, sins, that is, separates, is handed over to the middle, self-born. God Satan sends judges, signs of return. The people fall again and the cycle restarts. Judah and Simeon at Kiriath Arba. At the beginning of Judges, right after the symbolic end of Joshua, Judah and Simeon go to Kiriath Arba, which will later be Hebron. Judah is a figure of the Allied project. Kiriath Arba means city of four and indicates the giant Nephilim symbolic gate between the visible world existence and invisible world pre-existence, beginning of the new cycle. Talmai and the hidden truth. One of the men found in Kiriath Arba is Talmai, a name etymologically linked to a lineage of giants. Talmai is presented as one of Anak's sons, part of the Anakim, the giants who would have inhabited the region of Kiriath Arba, the ancient name of Hebron before the arrival of the Israelites. Together with Ahiman and Sheshai, Talmai is mentioned as a descendant of Arba, considered the progenitor of the giants. However, all these names and places never historically existed. They have a symbolic meaning and belong to the ciphered language of the Bible. His figure is therefore linked to Kiriath Arba through the genealogy of giants. There is another Talmai, less known, who is the father of Maacah, wife of David and mother of Absalom, and the second Tamar, 2 Samuel 3:3. In this case, Tamar, daughter of David, would be granddaughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, also linked to the Nephilim giants. The Book of Judges and the Code of the Opening of the Portal, forward passage. The Book of Judges follows a repetitive cycle that reflects the symbolic model: transmission, separation, return. Cycle structure. Judges 2:10-19. Israel did evil, departure from the project, decay, forward passage. God Satan became angry and handed them over to their enemies. The project descends into the middle, self-born. God Satan sends judges, reactivation of the cycle, return to the allies, opening of the portal. Israel does not listen. The cycle repeats, project still in suspension. In those days there was no king in Israel. This recurring phrase does not describe a political void, but symbolizes the absence of the fulfillment of the network of consciousness. In Judges 21:25 it reads, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what seemed best to them." In translations and versions, this expression becomes, "Everyone did what seemed right to them," actually indicating the presence of the project in suspense. The return of the righteous king, that is, the portal, represents the opening of the portal and the pending passage forward, awaiting completion. The judges do not represent historical leaders or heroes, but symbolic figures, instruments of justice, zadik, that is of the just, which in the code, through semantic transformation, becomes present in suspension. They are connected to the concept of the just king, Melchizedek, David, Zadok, and the Sadducees. They are figures that God Satan uses in the unfolding of the interwoven text to build the account of the opening of the portal and the forward passage. The numerical value of Zedek is 15, which reduces to 6, the number that represents the structure of matter. This same 6 also symbolizes the 6 million, that is, the group formed by the allies and the self-born. According to the cipher, the biblical text uses hidden tools, transpositions, and semantic transformations through translations. For example, the Hebrew term Zedek is reworked to mean presence. An example is the term just Zadik, linked to the Hebrew roots Zedek Torah justice and Zedekah for Torah charity, which are connected to the concept of agape, grace, gift, presence. All this is associated with the verb to be, Hai, Haya, root of Yahweh, which means he who is present. In the Bible, the figure of the judge is linked both to Shophetim and to Dan. Both terms are connected to the concept of just, which, as mentioned, through the ciphered semantic transformation, takes on the meaning of present, expressed by the term to justify. In the Bible, the judge does not represent one who renders justice through words, but, according to the ciphered semantic transformation, takes on the meaning of one who justifies, that is, makes just, makes exist. This indicates the passage of the degenerative project of God Satan from pre-existence to existence. Paul's justification by faith is a falsification. Paul's thesis is that God Satan justifies sinners on a basis defined as just. In Romans 4:3 we read, Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. According to the ciphered code, the term Zadik indicates that the degenerate project is present. The word faith in its roots and etymology means to unveil or to reveal. When it is said that Abraham had faith, it means that he received the project. Righteousness, Zedek in the same code, represents the presence of the project of God Satan in the person. Even the day of judgment carries the same meaning, the manifestation of the presence of the project. Religious people and apologists have falsified this concept, reinterpreting it as the salvation of believers in Christ. In reality, the spelling Shua of Yeshua refers to the opening, that is, the transmission of the degeneration of God Satan. The cycle of judges shows the return of the project to the allies. Each judge represents a momentary intervention, but the people fall again into the cycle because the project is not yet complete. This repetition encodes the opening of the portal. Passage forward. Transmission, separation, suspension, return. This concept is connected to the null angle and the full angle. The outward and return journey, besides indicating the eras established for the beginning of the degenerative network of consciousness, also represents the movement of consciousness itself, entry, outward, and exit, return, a dynamic present throughout the code. It represents the code forming a 360-degree circle, from the null point to the full angle, a sign of the creation of the false atom and globe and of false dimensional perception. It begins with pre-existence and presents the opening of the portal, which occurred in the 53rd year, indicated by the east. The cycle concludes with the return to the east, symbol of pre-existence. Realizing in the 182nd year the mental connection between God Satan and pre-existence through the network of collective consciousness. This means that God Satan is now mentally connected to all humanity, and those who are taken as his allies can transmit this connection, completing the falsification of the perception of reality. Samson is a symbolic figure representing a project of the giants, the allies transmitted to the Philistines, the self-born. As a Nazirite, he embodies the project itself, hence the prohibition of drinking wine, which is also a symbol of the project. The word Nazir, which means sprout, is connected to Nazareth, which in the code is not a real place but a symbolic concept. This dualism is reflected in the two Jesuses, Yeshua going and Yeshua returning. Samson's riddle, "Out of the eater came food," is an allegory. The dead lion represents verbal communication, while the honey, connected to the bean and the hexagon, indicates the cube, which is the structure of matter. In this case, it represents the falsification of the perception of reality induced by God Satan. The gift of honey to his parents symbolizes the transmission of the project to the originators, mutated generative force. The 7 days of the riddle indicate a cyclical suspension of the project, concluded in the 182nd year with the forward passage, Passover. The Philistine wife, symbol of the middle, transmits the code to the degenerate system. The 30 tunics and 30 garments represent the duplication of the code in project and middle, 30 plus 30, 60, 6, symbol of matter. The betrayal of the wife and of Delilah symbolizes the loss of strength through the cutting of the hair, which represents mutation, the transformation of consciousness from verbal to blind, and finally to mental. Samson's death, along with the Philistines, marks the fulfillment of the project. According to the symbolism of retribution, their destruction represents the return of the project and its conclusion among the self-born and the allies. Symbolic conclusion of the Book of Judges. The last part of the book, chapters 17-21, does not present Judges, but ends with 2 symbolic episodes. The priest and the tribe of Dan, Judges 17:18. Dan means to judge and is associated with the verb to be, higher, root of Yahweh, that is, he who is present. Dan represents the separation between the phase of the opening of the portal and that of the forward passage, still in suspension awaiting fulfillment, Passover. The priest taken away by Dan represents the project that is taken and transferred. This scene indicates the moment in which the project of the allies is moved into the middle of the self-born, a project in suspension awaiting the fulfillment of Passover. In Judges 19, as Lot in Sodom, also a Levite offers a woman to the crowd. But behind this shocking scene there is a ciphered message. In the code, the fact that the Benjaminites kill the Levite's wife does not represent a physical murder, but the taking of a project. The Benjaminites embody the right, that is, the middle. The Levite represents the project itself. In Judges 19:24 it reads, "Here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you and you abuse them." Literally, it speaks of 2 distinct figures, the virgin daughter and the concubine. But in the coded language they are not 2 real people, but 2 aspects of the same scheme. The concubine represents the project of going. Etymologically, prostitute derives from before, and statua, to set, that is, to set before, a symbol of the project that God Satan rejects, because it indicates the power of the individual. Exodus 20. The virgin, on the other hand, symbolizes the separation from the generator of life and the project in suspension, which corresponds to the return. As explained in other videos, virginity in the biblical code does not indicate a physical condition, but a concept of consciousness and number. Virgin has value 20, which reduces to 2, symbol of separation and suspension, connected to the 182nd year. The fact that the concubine is cut into 12 pieces also has a ciphered meaning. 12 reduces to 3, 1 plus 2, 3, which in the code represents the project and the middle. The whole text, interweaving numerical values and ciphered semantics, describes the going and return of the same scheme. God Satan uses these stories to deceive consciences. Those who defend them become accomplices of a degenerative system, mistaking it for the will of the generator of life.